Okay, folks. Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Hey, Ryan.
Hi. Everyone have a good weekend?
Humid and hot. Very humid.
Indeed.
How's Philly? You guys have already fixed the highway? Is that
Yeah,
true?
I know.
Is that
Somehow.
actually true? That's incredible to me. I thought that would be like a years long thing.
They only opened up like I think 2 lanes in each direction. And like what it's weird to me because like they opened up the middle like lanes. So I think it's like 8 lanes there. And they like did like a temporary bridge in the middle, 2 on each, which like I guess kind of makes sense, but then how do you fix it? Like you think you do like half of it at a time. So like
Yeah, I don't
they're
know.
gonna like do like
I would
2
avoid
on each
that whole
side
area for
to
quite
like
some time. Because 2 lanes has not been on that stretch of road for a long time.
down the middle. Yeah, I mean that area. Yeah.
Did you see the
But
video
yeah.
of them driving over that bridge? I would have been hysterical. I would have been. Bridges and what's the other thing that I hate so much? Jillian should know. There's something else that I always fear. Oh no, the other thing was that submarine. I was like, you would have to pay me at least $1 million to get on that thing. Forget it. I was
soon, Eva. Too soon.
no, that was
I
not
wasn't
gonna
ready.
happen. That was never gonna happen. I was like, that's something that will never happen. If I could just cross that off the current events that will never affect me personally. Oh, but I did actually have a coding related question. Well, loosely related question
Sure.
about Reddit and APIs. What is the thing Reddit is doing?
Oh yeah.
Explain that to me, or explain to everybody. It's really
Yeah. So
it's interesting to see APIs in the news.
yeah, APIs in the news. How rare. Maybe not.
It's like I have to ask Ryan about this.
Yeah, I mean, I will admit that I haven't really been following that whole thing too closely, but from what I understand, I mean, the whole idea of an API, it's a way, and we're going to talk about this later this week, but I think for many of you have sort of read ahead metaphorically and know quite a bit about this, but like it's a technology that allows you to get data from one thing to another thing and allow to have two systems interconnect. Sort of a standardized way to do that. There's documentation on it. You can understand the documentation. There's a lot of services out there where you have like for example, like Reddit. Maybe you want to build your own custom like Reddit client because you don't like the default one. So what you do is you like go to Reddit's API, you like get some API information to connect to it. For those who know, you get like an API token or something like that. And then you can make requests according to their documentation and like you can query Reddit. And this means you can like make your own application. I mean, like kind of like I showed with the New York Times yesterday and what we're going to show again today, like something like that, where you're making a request to a third-party service, you're getting back the data showing it. And that's great. And for many years, they and many other folks had like a third-party API. But what's sort of changed.
Can I just interrupt you here, like in regular terms, like what kind of information can I get from Reddit through the API?
Yeah, so as I will admit, I've never used Reddit's API, but if I had to guess, things like maybe a list of all subreddits or a list of messages in subreddits, or like also like extending that, like maybe there are actions where like you can like on a user's behalf, like reply to like a message or like leave a message on a post in a subreddit, like all the sort of stuff you would do in like a typical experience of using an application like Reddit. Most likely, if it's got a well like exposed API, they probably have a lot of actions for that. And like, yeah, I mean, Palash, you're kind of starting to head in the direction here where like, I mean, there's always been like a lot of bots on social media that would like, and many of these are like very useful. Like the one that I know that I've seen used that I've always thought was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's like on Twitter, you have like the thread unroller bot or whatever that will like go through a big thread and will like put it into one big page for you. And like, these are like just sort of part of the experience of using these systems. And like a lot of these, the way they work is they use an API behind the scenes. Like they're a piece of code that's running that's like listening for requests, as it were, and then we'll like do a thing. And then like that often that thing is like make a bunch of requests to Reddit to like or Twitter or whatever service to like perform your action. But what sort of really like changed the game here a little bit is like all this like ChatGPT OpenAI stuff. And what's changed about it isn't like the technology itself, but it's that in order to build systems like that, you need lots of data. So for kind of the uninitiated, like the way these systems work is you have a lot of data. You like start with a lot of data, and you take this data and you sort of, as like a scientist, like what I'm explaining here is like kind of like at a 10,000 foot view, like how something like machine learning or deep learning works. So you take like this data and you look at it and you're like, I think this data, like using this data, I can determine some like output. And you look at it and you're like, I think I needed these bits of data to go into that output. So like those would be like the input, they go into sort of like a program, that program would generate the output. And what you do is like you could just like write a program that does that, like statistics and math and all that. But it turns out that like the way these systems are built, like you can just like give a computer all these inputs, and then like sort of get it like somewhat close, like be like, I think the way these things should interact is like in this sort of way, sort of connect all those inputs up into this sort of structure that is called a neural network. And for anyone who's like listening to this or watching this who like actually knows how this stuff works, I apologize. I'm going to do a really bad job of explaining it. This is how me, the software engineer who doesn't do like data science, like explains it. But you sort of like, you take that data and like goes into the system, and there's a bunch of like weights that sort of control how it all gets combined together. And so, and then those weights sort of like through a bunch of repeated like running of that thing over and over, and by like running it, testing the output, and then like adjusting the weights and running it and testing the output, adjusting the weights, doing that over and over and over, you can make the system like work really well at like solving a particular problem. And like that's kind of what, like that's how a lot of these systems work. But what's been particularly interesting about a lot of the OpenAI ChatGPT stuff is they have just like their data set has been the internet. Like most of the time when you have like data you're training a model on, it's like a very specific kind of data. It's maybe like I don't know, like if you're doing something about like predicting weather, for example, maybe it's things like precipitation and things like, is it cloudy here, or like wind speed and wind direction and temperature and humidity and all these sort of like weather things. But like for them, they're just using like raw text, and the idea is they're just like feeding all this raw text. And when I say like raw text, I mean I don't even know how much, but I would guess like easily like petabytes and petabytes of text. Petabyte being like 1024 terabytes. So like, and text, like every character is 1 byte. And like a byte is like a billionth of a gigabyte. So like we're talking like lots and lots and lots of text. And you feed all this text in, this system like is able to find patterns in that text, as using those patterns like predict what the next word should be in a sentence. And the controversy kind of where that comes in is, in order to train your system and in order for it to get better, you need all this input data. And one place they've gotten a lot of input data has been from these social networks like Reddit, like Twitter, like, I mean, I don't know like off the top of my head the whole list, but I know like Reddit is one case where like they've apparently noticed a lot of this. And what they've basically been realizing is like, wait a second. So like OpenAI is getting all of our data for free. They're using it to train their models and make them money. And they probably have found some sort of like weaselly way where in their terms of service of using their thing, like why that's not allowed, like why that sort of use case doesn't really fit the ethos of how their thing works. And most likely though, they can't really prevent it, because like they can't really tell like a request coming into their service if it's coming from like some OpenAI thing, coming from somebody else. I mean, like anyone can just make an account, like pay them a trivial amount of money maybe to get access to the API, or maybe it's just free, and like make requests. And we're going to talk about this later this week, so it'll make more sense. But like, because of that, like my understanding of sort of the issue is like they just made the call, we can't control this. So we're just going to like, basically, it's like one of those things where like one person like spoiled it. So it's like spoiling it for everybody. And it's like, oh, okay, well, now we're just going to charge a bunch of money per request because we don't know how to like tell if a request is coming from OpenAI or not. So that's my understanding of the issue. I might have details incorrect, but Does that make sense?
It does, especially since, I mean, Reddit is unverified. I mean, the information on Reddit is unverified. You can go there and read it, but it's a lot of it's nonsense. I mean, so that's why AI is not, why it can't distinguish between reliable and unreliable information, can it?
Well, it can't, but that's
On
sort of
Reddit,
the
on a
idea.
platform like Reddit, let's say.
Yeah, but that's not really the goal of that data. The goal is just to feed it a ton of data.
Right,
Like,
I understand that.
yeah,
In terms of
And-
AI,
yeah,
it's a
and
great source of information.
well,
If
like
you
it-
can't
that's-
discriminate between, can it? I don't know.
no, I mean, like, I guess it can't for one, but then also if you think about it, like definitely can't better than we can, and we already can't. So like, that's a really tricky problem. But like I mean, there's like goals around trying to make the output of these systems like try to be verifiable and like make sure it's correct. But at the end of the day, if you're just feeding in arbitrary data that you know is incorrect, like that could be incorrect, like you can't build a system with that kind of data that like will always give you correct data. And I would probably guess, although I really don't know, but if you were to like put in the work to try to verify all the data you feed into it, it probably would still hallucinate and give you like things that are incorrect. It's just one of those things where like humans haven't even figured out how to like
Freelancers do the same thing. Oh, sorry. Amazon's here, so. But I mean, when you read freelancer content, if it's a subject that they don't understand, they just write a bunch of nonsense too. So
Yeah.
they get paid. It's exactly what
Yeah.
humans do when they have no choice. But can AI distinguish? What if AI picks up two contradictory pieces of information? Do you know what it does?
So
Does anybody
like,
know what it does?
I guess that's a really hard question to answer because like what kind of AI are you talking about for one? But then also like on top of that, there's lots of different implementations of these systems that probably all do different things. So like I gotta give you the most like it depends answer there, where it's just like it really would on, and it's one of those things where like case by case, unless you really test it, like there's no way to really know. Like and like what a lot of these companies like my understanding again, but like they're trying to like run through cases. But it's one of those things where like it's kind of like an arms race, but it's like them versus the machine that they're sort of like training. So it's kind of like them versus themselves, but it's like a machine they're like making better, but it's like they don't know how they're making it better. They're just making it better. And they're doing that, but then there's another side of like their sort of like group that's just like, okay, we're making this thing better and that's great, but like what are we actually doing? Like I think we're making it better, but like how, like what is like this new version, like how is its behavior changed? It's sort of this weird thing where like one group's like making it better and the other group's like trying to understand what the heck they just even did. I mean, that's my understanding of it, but like I'm really like I'm having to caveat what I'm saying here because I'm really like stepping into waters I don't really understand. I know enough to like maybe know some of the questions to start to ask, but I haven't really researched it yet.
I mean, there's not much to know yet. I mean, it's just even the founders don't know a lot of what AI is like a chat GPT or other things are going to produce. So it's, interesting time to be alive.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting. So I'm noticing some folks are reporting some potential internet issues on my end again, which is unfortunate. I don't know if there's anything I can do about it at the moment. I went back and watched some of the recordings from last time, and it seemed kind of intermittent. I guess like if it becomes like really bad, like please like let me know in the messages in Zoom messages, and I'll take a look, or send me a Slack message or something. And I will again try to take a look during the break and see if I can fix anything. But it's one of those things where like I think it's just the bandwidth of my building, and like if just for some reason people are like doing stuff 1 split second, it just like cuts out. I don't know if there's really that much I can do about it, which I'm sorry about that, but I'm sort of doing what I can here.
Now, this may sound like a stupid question, but if people are still working and you're in your apartment, does that put more strain on it? Or is that just like something someone told me once and I believed?
No, you can think of it like there's a pipe that's leaving my building, and all the internet traffic's got to flow through that pipe, and that pipe's a fixed size. And like, if there's more metaphorical bits flowing through that pipe, then like, at some point those bits are gonna have to like queue up and are gonna go through slower. So it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like there's a word for this. They call it bandwidth, sort of like pipe. So it's and like, okay, in particular, the building I'm in is just like has really crappy internet. I can't figure out why. It's like Comcast. It's like not great. So I don't know. Like I might go to a WeWork again later this week. That worked out, I think, really well before. So I might make that happen again. But anyway, so we are going to be doing the official day on Fetch today. So we talked a little bit about Fetch last week. I guess even taking a step back further. So we started our week last week talking about making requests, connecting over TCP between different computers on the internet. We talked about how the internet works, and then we sort of moved on to making requests with HTTP. So HTTP being a protocol we can send over TCP. We're able to, yeah, Mel, it looks like the recording started. We're good. But we're able to make requests over HTTP between computers, and that whole like client server request response workflow, and then get data back. That's great. Then there we moved on to thinking about how we can make requests. And we talked about curl, postman, and then a little bit of fetch, but we're going to talk more about fetch today. So that's kind of like very quick high-level summary to just sort of get everyone back in that frame of mind. So what I'm going to do here, we went through the initial go of fetch on Friday. It sounded like after that, a decent number of folks kind of like they were able to get a gist of how things were going, which was great. But not everyone did, and that's totally fine. So we're going to go through it again today. I'm going to sort of go through the same sort of slides. And then after that, I'm going to go into a bit more of an in-depth explanation on that whole thing. We're going to do a bunch of examples. And hopefully by the end, we'll have everyone making some requests with fetch on their system. So that's the hope. We'll see how it goes. Let me share my screen, and then we can get started here. Okay. Am I good? Can people see my screen? Okay, excellent. So I started off last time showing you this New York Times bestsellers list project. So I'm going to quickly show you that again here. And this is what we're going to be starting at the end of this week. This is Max likes to call this the midterm for careers in code, which I think is a little bit ambitious, but like not ambitious, more just like I never really thought of it being like that kind of project, but Max seems to really think it's a good one. So cool. That's great. But the idea of this project is it is a web application that shows you the New York Times best-selling books that are currently active. And the way it does that is when you load the page, it makes a request to the New York Times API, the New York Times servers. And it makes a request, an HTTP request, and it gets some data back from the New York Times servers that like that data contains the books, the book information. And then what this application does, it takes that book data and it like parses it, it like unpacks it, reads the body, understands what's in there, and then it uses that to create an HTML document, like creates DOM nodes, creates divs, create images, links, all that sort of stuff, and then puts it in the web page. And there you go. Now you see the books. So kind of the idea with this application, like why it's maybe kind of an interesting one to tie a bunch of things together, is you're having to kind of do everything you've done so far in the class as part of it. Like you're doing HTML, CSS, you're writing some JavaScript to like manipulate the page to add in DOM nodes, using the DOM to do all that. And then you're also making a request with fetch. So you're having to learn about an API system, understand how it works, poke and prod it, understand like the bits and pieces of how it works. And then use that, what you learned, to make a request with a tool in the browser, which with fetch. And then at the very end, once you've got all the pieces fitting together with the HTML, the CSS, the making the request, writing it all to the JavaScript, to the DOM with JavaScript, you then have this application that like you can just show to somebody, and someone's like, oh, this actually like kind of looks like a thing. Like I can use it. It's not some like super contrived thing that's logged into a console and you gotta be like, hey, take a look at this thing I wrote. It's in the terminal though, and like you're never going to use it. Like this is a sort of thing where like someone could open this up like on their computer. You could show it to someone and they'd be like, oh yeah, this is like an application. It like does like a very small thing, but like it does a thing. It's like it's something that like people can really wrap their heads around. And last time Doug showed his example from back in the day of how like he did this one, and like often folks want to go a little crazy with it. They like decide they want to add some like CSS to like make it look a little bit more fancy than what I have here. And other folks are just like, I just want to like go bare minimum, just like print out my information and be done. And that's fine too. So it's tends to be one that folks kind of like, and it's like a good one to sort of like to like really exercise sort of everything you've learned so far. So that's a project, and we're going to get started at that on Friday, probably Friday after the break. So it's going to be right at the end of the week, and it's going to be kind of like your like homework assignment over the weekend. Actually, speaking of homework assignments, I haven't taken a look at any of those optional assignments from last week. I still need to do that. If you've done it though, great. If you haven't, totally fine. Tasha, go for it.
So I totally missed your office hours yesterday.
Yeah,
Do you
no
have
problem.
any posted on Calendly coming up?
So I have my Calendly open.
9 to
Right now
5
it's only open.
weekends.
Yeah, it's only on weekends. If that's
Mm.
not a good time for you though, reach out to me in Slack and we'll get something up outside of that. It's more
Okay.
just like I don't have it open up like all week because like I work professionally and like I just don't want stuff showing up on my calendar and like work meetings and careers and code meetings conflicting. But here or there, totally no problem.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep. Oh, Shannon asked for the slides. Let me post those in chat here. Okay. So, fetch. So fetch is a tool just like Postman and curl that allows us to make web requests in a web browser. So we can make requests to a server with HTTP, all the same bits and pieces we use when we are making requests with curl and Postman. We can make those requests and get back responses. And then with that response data in a web browser, do whatever we want. We've got it in JavaScript. We can sort of like, log it out. We can put it in the HTML document. We can do whatever we want. We're in JavaScript. The world is open. We're going to be talking about fetch. There's a few other tools that you can use in a web browser to make requests like this. This is an abbreviated list. There's some other ones, but they're not as important for this class. We're just going to be talking about fetch. But if you have to use any of these sort of tools in the future, like jQuery.ajax, Axios, request promise, any of these sort of things, they're very similar. All these tools kind of follow the same kind of pattern. Just fetch is kind of the easiest one for us to get started with. So yeah, I just said that. So fetch is a global JavaScript function. So it works just like something like document to get element by ID or like console.log. It's something that if you go into your JavaScript console and you type fetch and hit enter, it's going to be defined. And the way fetch works, it takes two parameters. So it's a function. So you type it, you put parentheses, and that's how you call it. So you put like parentheses around your arguments. And your first argument is a string, and it's required. You have to specify it. And that first argument is the URL you want to make a request to. So that URL, same thing we talked about last week. So something like it has a protocol http:// and then like your domain name. So maybe like careersandcode.xyz. And then after that, a path. So maybe something like /fruit. And then the other argument, the second argument, is optional, and it's an object. And this object, you can give a bunch of parameters to specify other things you might want to specify in your request. So for example, a method. Maybe you don't want to, you want to like specify a custom method like post. You want to make a post request. Well, then you've got to use a second argument. You've got to specify key of method, value of post. Maybe you want to specify a custom body in your request. You've got a post request, you want to send data in there. The way you do that is your second parameter has a body key, and you can specify that, and it's got you can put a value of a string after that body key. And that string is what gets put into that body section of that request. And the last thing is the headers. So the headers is probably the most confusing out of all these. And what makes it a bit confusing is the key is headers, but the value is actually another object. So importantly, the way the JavaScript objects work is like the key, the value, they can be kind of whatever you want. So the value here, these are strings, but here that value is an object. So it was like these curly braces are kind of like their own thing, like different than this. But this inner object, the keys and values inside of here, these allow you to define the key values for your headers. So like, remember how the header has like the name part, the value part. So like, this is like the name part, this is like the value part, something kind of like that. And this is how those map. So like the path goes there, the method goes there, and then your headers go here, and then your body goes here. So just sort of map directly one-to-one like that. I did say that second parameter is optional. So you can call fetch like this is totally valid, like not including that second parameter. So it's an optional parameter. And if you don't specify it, it's by default going to make a GET request with no custom headers and no body. So like just fetch parenthesis, quote URL, quote parenthesis, like just that. We'll just make like a GET request that URL. That's it. And that's helpful. Like often you just need to do that. You don't need anything else. So like you can omit that second parameter, but you'll see in practice for most of the requests we're going to make today and for the rest of this section of Curious in Code, I'll include it just because like I want to be thorough and make it easy to understand, but just know you can omit it if you want. Okay. So what I just walked through there was sort of the syntax of calling fetch directly. That's kind of like the first part of this task. So, or the first part of like this fetch kind of concept. So I guess I kind of want to do some exercise and just sort of walk through that a bit, but it's a bit hard to do that until we've talked about the promise stuff too. They kind of go together and you can't really do one without the other. So I'm going to ask if folks have any questions, but I guess just know that like we're going to do a bunch of examples, but I just kind of got to get through all this so we can kind of do it all as one chunk. I don't have like any good self-contained examples for this first part. So any questions I can sort of ask or I can answer about like fetch, the function itself, like sort of the arguments, where they go, the structure of it.
I guess I do have a question.
Yeah.
So when we're doing this, would we actually put like the fetch and then put it like just how you have it set up here?
Yeah, this is the exact JavaScript you would type. So you would like make a JavaScript file like myfile.js, and then you would put this literally in that file. And what this will do is this will make a request, and what it will return is what we're going to talk about in a second, the promise thing, but it'll return data that will contain your response. So just like something like document.getElementID, you call that function, and it gives you back as a return value like the element on the page. Very similar idea. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. Kailash, go for it.
How much information can headers contain? For example, if we download a JSON from some API, like is that information usually in the header part of it or the body? Good
question. So you're a bit ahead of me here, but the answer is normally JSON goes in the body. Typically, what you'll find in header like information about your information or information about the request specifically. So that's not like the primary data, but it's maybe things like, I don't know, like the date of the server or like information identifying like the client making the request. Typically headers, like setting custom headers is not super common. I mean, there's a few headers you might set like often, but like setting like lots of custom headers is kind of uncommon. There's maybe like one or two you might set regularly, and that's about it. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Shay, how are you?
Can't complain. You kind of answered one of my other questions about the second parameters being optional, but I wanted to ask, is there a situation where the second parameter or an additional one will be required, or is it always optional no matter the method?
So if you don't include your second parameter, actually before I said, I should say like fetch only takes 2 parameters. So like you'd never include a third parameter. So it's either 1 or 2, and those are your only options. You can't specify 0 either, that won't work. So like 1 or 2 are your options. But if you don't include that second parameter, you only include 1 parameter, that's going to make a get request. So you can't change the method. The only way you can change the method is by including that second parameter. And that will let you specify that method post thing. And like that will sort of specify like, oh, okay, I'm making a post request. So there's no way without specifying 2 parameters that you can make a post request, or you can make a request for the body or make a request for the custom headers. Does
Appreciate
that
it.
make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. Okay, I'll keep moving. So I think the trickier part with fetch beyond just call of a and I think I was able to wrap their head around it. But I also think we have a bit of a way to go, and that's totally fine. It normally takes a few iterations of this for it really to make sense to folks. Oh, freezing. Excellent. Okay. Am I good now? I'm sort of basing this off whether I can see other people moving. And if I see that, I'm thinking I'm probably good, but like maybe I'm not. I don't know.
You're totally not good
Um,
because you're speaking and your smile is permanently fixed in your window, sir. You no, you are not okay.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer here. I don't know if I have a good answer here.
It's not frequent, and like it comes in and out. Like right now, it's
Oh,
steady.
turn video off.
Well, only when
That's
he
a good
says the
point.
important stuff.
Yeah, it's like when you get to explain an explanation, that's when it wants to go crazy. But
Come on now.
Yeah.
it sounds better.
Okay. Yeah, that was whoever brought that up. It's a good point. I always forget about that. We'll give that a shot, see if that helps.
Ryan.
So yeah. Oh, did someone say Ryan?
I just said sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
Yeah.
no problem. No, this is totally my fault. It's more just it's persistent than it is what it is. So I think the thing that is most tricky about fetch, that most students have the most difficult time understanding, is this idea of a promise. And I guess what I want to spend most of today doing is walking through kind of step by step why promises exist. So on Thursday, I took the approach of more just like, here they are, here's how they work. And that works for some folks. But like I don't think it really answers like why they exist. And I think a big like persistent thing that people will think is just like, okay, you got this function fetch. Why can't this function just return my response? Like I call it like runs, and then like it returns like maybe a value that's got like a status key on it and like a body key on it. Like that would make a lot of sense. That would work how you'd think it would work. And I guess I agree. That makes a lot of sense. And that is actually how it works in many programming languages, but JavaScript is a bit special. And I guess I want to sort of go through kind of why that won't work in JavaScript sort of bit by bit. And I think at the end, this is going to be one of those things we're going to sort of have to take a bit of a winding journey, but I think it's going to be helpful once we get to the end, because I'll be able to kind of, with the knowledge we learn along the way, what's going on, I hopefully will make more sense. I'm sort of like, I'm mirroring this after a class I gave a few cohorts ago, which went really well. So we'll give it a shot. We'll see how it goes. And if we need to sort of change tact or readjust, we can make that happen. Okay. So I am going to go into my code editor here. So I'm going to just be typing out a bunch of code for the next like half hour, 45 minutes. And we're going to sort of work together, follow along with some stuff. You can try to follow along if you want, but there's going to be some, like, there are some points where like, we're sort of going to be doing some like kind of abstract things. So I guess I would say like, you can follow along if you want, but I'm not sure how helpful it'll be. Okay, so I've got I'm going to start here with just a basic file here. Okay, and this here, excellent. Let me close out some of these things here. Okay, there we go. Okay. So what I have here to start with is I've got an HTML file, a JavaScript file, and I've got the file inside, or this JavaScript inside. I'm just logging out hello, just somewhere to start. Got hello there. Great. Everything's good there. Okay. So most JavaScript operations you've run across, every JavaScript function you've run across so far has been what's called synchronous. So an example of a synchronous function is something like this, maybe like a function called like add, where like add takes like A and B, maybe like returns A plus B. Something kind of like that. Maybe I'll do something down here. I'll go like console.log add like 2 and 3. So I imagine for most folks, you can kind of follow what's going to go on here, but I'll save it. We can take a look here. We get 5. So what's happening here? Let me sort of walk through step by step what's happening. So start on line 1 here. Console.log hello.
Ryan, could you make your VS Code Studio bigger?
Oh yeah, sorry about that. How's that? Is that good or you want it even bigger?
I'd say bigger still.
Okay, how's that?
Yes. It's like an eye
Okay.
test. Yes, I can see that.
Cool. I'll also make this one bigger as well. Okay. So what's this here? Well, first of all, starting on line 1, console.log hello, I imagine. And then line 3, we get down here. This here will add. Add takes 2 parameters, A and B, and then it returns adding those parameters up together. So this is defining a function. It's just sort of like storing it for later. We're not doing anything with it right now. We're just sort of like keeping it around for later. And then we get to line 7. And on line 7, we're then taking add 2 and 3. We're calling this. Actually, I might even stick this up here into a variable just to make this even more obvious. Result, something kind of like that. Yeah, there we go. So still does the same thing. But so we call add 2 and 3. So passing to add, A is 2, B is 3, add it together, we return. So this evaluates to be 2 plus 3, 5, goes into result, and we log out result. So sort of get what you expect there. Importantly, add, as I said before, is a synchronous function. So not everything in JavaScript is a synchronous function. Let's talk about an example where like maybe you couldn't use a synchronous function, or where JavaScript doesn't use a synchronous function. Actually, before I do that, like I imagine this probably makes sense to everybody. I imagine like walking through with Max, you've done examples like this. I just sort of want to start from a place for like of understanding where things kind of generally make sense. Any questions about this before I continue? So let's say I wanted to write a this out. I'm just going to keep that up there for later. Let's say I want to do something like wait. So like I want to like log out maybe like 2, 3. And what I want to do is something like log out 1 and then like wait for a second. And log out 2 and then wait for a second and log out 3. So I see like 1, wait a second, 2, wait a second, 3. So I guess from what you've learned right now, you probably don't really have a good way to do this. Like there's no sort of like easy sort of solution to solve this sort of problem. Like in most programming languages, there is this concept of a do. And to be clear, what I'm typing here, like this isn't real JavaScript. This won't actually work. I'm just sort of like going through an example for it to hopefully make sense. So like I could call like sleep. Oh, not that sleep. Oh, come on. It's gonna like autocorrect. I don't want it to autocorrect. Sleep 1,000. Yeah. I'll do like that. Yeah. So in many programming languages, you have this function called sleep. And what sleep will do is it'll sort of like just like stall here for like a second. So assuming this was like valid JavaScript, what you would get is something like you'd get hello, you come down to line 12, you get like, okay, log out 1, then second. So, and what this will do is it'll sort of just like wait here. So it'll get here and it'll wait here for like a second. And then after a second goes by, I'll go down to line 14 and then it'll log out 2. And it'll go down to line 15. It'll wait another second and then log out, then go or line 16 and log out 3. And in many programming languages, that's how you do it. But this is like, this won't work in JavaScript. This sort of like style of writing code. The reason why is JavaScript is what is called single-threaded. So there's this like there's kind of and multi-threaded are kind of like the two approaches to running code in many cases. And what single-threaded means is you have like a line of code that can run at a time. So like we've been sort of doing through this exercise of like going like line by line, being like, okay, we're on line 1, line 12, line. And we're only on one line at a time. We're like have one like execution context that's running, like one line we're on. And what that means is if we're currently running a line, we can't do other things at the same time. So like, you might be like, okay, well, like whatever, that's not a big deal. You're not doing other things at the same time. You're just kind of like waiting here for a second. Why is the deal? Well, the deal is you do actually need to do other things. The web browser behind the scenes, there's a bunch of like things that happen in the background all the time. If you had code like this, what would actually happen while you're in this sleep is like the web would like do a halt. Because like for an example, like things web browsers are doing all the time. Let's say you do something like resize your, click on a button. It's like when you do that thing, it has to like action, it has to process code in order to make, like when you resize, it's JavaScript events that are sort of associated with that resize action you've got to run. It's got like there's a bunch of things that have to happen when. If you were in the sleep here while it was while you were up, okay. Well, I'm having trouble.
It's not worth logging out and logging back in. That's my fix. My only fix.
Like this just seems to happen periodically for me. Gotten off work.
All right, Shakota, it's on you.
I just seen that. I was like, what?
Take it from here.
I got nothing for y'all.
Yo, that would be mad funny if Dakota just got up there and started killing it. Like, well, y'all, let's get into it.
Let me open up my VS Code real quick.
Okay, folks. So that just happened. I just got kicked off the call. Mel mentioned that some of you folks might have heard of set timeout before. Just like, is that something that a phrase you've just talked about? There's someone I can- Okay. Okay. Actually, folks, give me one moment. I'm gonna try something. I have one idea I might be able to do to fix my internet, but it might kick me offline for a second. So be right back. Okay, how's that? Better? Okay. We'll give this a try for a bit and see if this works. Better for now, indeed. Okay. Okay. So I guess we're kind of left off here is I was trying to walk through how you might think about delaying execution of code. And I noticed that someone mentioned that set timeout is something Max has covered before. So since he's covered it before, I might just jump right to that. So to be clear, what I was doing here is I was kind of working step by step through how you might go about like approaching doing this sort of delay sort of thing. And someone also mentioned in the comments, I don't think sleep's a thing in JavaScript. You're totally right. It isn't a thing in JavaScript. I'm showing you sort of an illustrative example of how you might think about doing this sort of thing, how you might delay execution of code, how you might like run code, wait a bit, and then run some more code. But to kind of like drop the lead here a bit, like the way you do this in JavaScript, you can't use the sleep thing, because if you try to do something like that, what you would do is you'd block the web browser, you block that single execution context, which is you're going through line by line trying to run your code. If you block that and the web browser is like, you try to do something in the web browser that's like another event fires, you like resize your web browser, there's a bunch of different things that happen, then it'll cause your web browser to lock up. And if your web browser locks up, that provides you like a really poor user experience. It's like not something that people want to encounter. So generally what you want to do is you want to like, as a rule, you want to keep that main thread. You want to keep that single thread you have access to. You want to keep it open. You want to keep it like available. So like when you run your code, you like run code in the web browser, you'll notice like it starts at the end, it goes to the end. And once it goes to the end, like it's just sort of like done. And that main thread is like available. That cursor, that pointer isn't like pointing anything anymore. And if some sort of other action occurs, it can like go up there and handle that other action. So like, I guess walking through that a bit more, the way that like makes the most sense for me to think about this is this idea of like at the very bottom of the file, having something like a little holding area or something. Holding area. Something maybe like this. So what happens like if you're running code, like just like this code like this, I start at the beginning and I just pretty much go from top to bottom, log out 1, log out 12, log out 13, log out 14. And then after I do that, my sort of execution pointer, where my code's going line by line that I'm running, it sort of goes in that holding area. And that's just sort of like where it stays. Like that's just down there kind of forever for like our program's done. But then like, let's say something happens to the web browser. Maybe above here, I did something like I had like a button that let's see, like something like button dot add event listener or something like that, and click. Something sort of like that. If
All right, class canceled.
Wait, so like, what is that? His laptop acting like that? Why is so? What's going on?
No, it's just his internet connection. Cities are like that. Sometimes when you're in a dense city, just for whatever stupid reason, you just can't get reception.
1 minute I seen, 1 minute I seen he was talking, and then he cut out, and then it was just mad cold on the screen. I'm like, hold up.
you know, I'm even on my phone. I'm even on my phone. um, yeah. Okay, folks. I'm chatting with Max about this whole situation because this is getting kind of untenable. He suggested that we go on break a bit early. I try to figure out my stuff, maybe attempt to find a new location, do triage this on my end, and then come back and hopefully things will be better. If I still can't figure it out, I might have to cancel class for the night, which I really want to avoid because we had some really good material for tonight, but it is what it is kind of here. And I can't instruct effectively if my internet's not working. So that's I think that's kind of where we're at the moment. So let's go on break until about 7 or so. I'll try to play around a bit and I'll give you an update then. Thank you for bearing with me, folks. I appreciate it. Okay, folks. Well, I have done some planning around on my end. I don't think things are going to get much better, unfortunately, which really sucks. So I talked with Max a bit. I think what we're going to do is I've got a video from the last cohort that I think matches pretty closely with the lesson I was going to give today. So I think what we sort of have agreed to do is I'm going to have you watch that on your own. Tomorrow, I'm going to be in a almost certainly going to have much better internet connection. And we're going to go through it again tomorrow. And it's going to, things a little askew, but I think overall it's going to be better than me trying to struggle through this situation I'm dealing with right now. So it's sort of the best thing I got at the moment. So I'll post that video in the chat. And I'll also post it in Slack as well in the Careers and Code C5 channel. So again, if you just joined us, it's I'm still having internet trouble. Did a bit of investigation. I think it's just like, pardon my French, but shit's hitting the bed in my neighborhood with internet infrastructure. There's nothing really I can do about it. So I have a video that I recorded from the last cohort that goes through kind of the same lesson I was going to go through today. So my hope is that you all can take a look at that, watch that sort of in place of your regular lesson. And then tomorrow, I'll almost certainly be in a place where I'll have some better internet. I'm going to go to a WeWork again tomorrow like I did last week. And that seemed to work out pretty well. And then once I do that, then we can sort of talk it through, and hopefully that will make things a little bit better, or it'll make it more efficient than me trying to like communicate through this crappy connection I have right now. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at here. But thanks for bearing with me, folks, for what we could out of that. But please watch that video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in Slack. I'll monitor that, so at least I can maybe help out a bit asynchronously there. But otherwise, I think we'll see you tomorrow. Kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. So yeah, thank you for bearing with me. See you tomorrow. Bye.